So what are the big differences in working culture, work-life balance and all that between these different countries?
A lot of the times the work culture is a function of the country culture.
E-commerce has grown tremendously in the last 5 to 10 years and at different points in different countries.
So e-commerce is growing everywhere. I'm talking about percentage.
What about the security for family and all that?
Then there were all these local groups, who used to do kidnapping and ask for ransom.
You were talking about all these countries you've worked: Singapore, Vietnam, Nigeria, और कहाँ था? US. You were in the US. Where in the US were you?
Chicago.
Okay. So what are the big differences in working culture, work-life balance and all that between these different countries?
It's very different, and a lot of the times the work culture is a function of the country culture, right? So for example, in in Nigeria, Vietnam, those kind of thing, the country cultures are, you can say, in a way very cohesive, very social, almost that tribal kind of a thing, right? So that is what is reflected in teams also, right? Where teams are also very social, they all look up to their leaders, so they expect their leaders to teach them, sort of be more prescriptive, but also kind of shield them, right? So they look at their leaders like a father figure kind of a thing, right? So that is there. They like to bond with each other, like it's sort of one big family. They also have these kind of strifes and emotional issues with each other, just like you would have in a family or a tribe, right? So those are the kind of those are the kind of cultures that you see, very high degree of interdependence. And then you have other more, you can say, more advanced countries or societies, right? Singapore probably somewhere in between, but US has a very individualistic culture, right, where everyone has sort of their own agenda, where everyone is a cog in the wheel. Everyone has a very a tight and a very well-defined view of, this is what I do, this is what I don't do. My job is my job. I have, for administrative purpose, I have a boss. There is a particular process where I, update once in a week or something like that. I then take my decisions, and then the outcome of those decisions. And I also have a very fixed view of मुझे इतना ही करना है, मुझे इसके अलावा नहीं करना है. Typically, work-life balance is probably more in more developed countries. Because in the other countries, life is tough. It's just things like commuting and getting to work, and those things are tough. But also because of the social thing, let's say if let's say one team has something, a very challenging task, they have to meet a deadline, few other people will come and help them and support them, right? So I would say work life, but I would say they are finding those emotional sort of richness or the emotional reward in work, right? So you are finding the reward of life in work, whereas in some others you have to segregate and say, okay, work में इतना ही मिलेगा, financial reward ही मिलेगा, emotional reward के लिए मुझे एक अलग से life lead करनी पड़ती है, right? So that's sort of the
Yes. And so you worked in these. You talked about work-life balance. What about the security for family and all that? As in, I've never worked in Africa, for instance. Africa, Nigeria, I know, is one of the bigger countries. But is it safe to work? Were you comfortable taking your wife and kid there?
Yeah, so again, Nigeria was a very long time back. I was in Nigeria between 2006, 7, 8, right? These 3 years. So it's almost been, 16 years. I will tell you about that time. See, that time there were, in Nigeria also, some of the places, let's say Lagos, which is the sort of the commercial capital, you had sort of threats of, small robberies, etc. And for that, that was a factor. And for that, one had to be careful. And also the company also used to provide sort of, even at a junior level, put you in the sort of the most find a house for you in the most premium locality, which is gated, provide security, have a trusted driver who's a company employee, etc., etc.
No, I wanted to understand because in some of these geographies, especially some of these African countries, and even in places like Colombia and all, when employees get posted there, companies guide them on how to deal with an event like this. If you get kidnapped, what do you do, and so on. Is that also something that you went through, that kind of training?
Not as a formal training, but again, since my boss who had got me in, he was also like sort of like a friend, philosopher and guide. So he gave some tips. He said tips, ऐसा हो जाए तो ऐसा करना, ऐसा हो जाए तो वैसा करना. So he did give some tips. Plus the other, Indian community people whom were there. So as Indians, we are good in giving advice to others. So I got a lot of advice. Fortunately, I did not have to implement any of the advice.
So Kimberly was a global role, right?
Yes.
So, what is the key, I would say, key difference in consumer behavior that you would say between Vietnam, India, and US?
I think 2 or 3. One is just sort of lot more, individualistic. So people are taking a lot of the decisions themselves as opposed to consulting with friends and family, which is a big theme in Asia, right? This whole word of mouth, friends and family recommendation, especially for, products, like diapers or even sanitary pads, right? So that was less. I wouldn't say, there's nothing which is black and white. So it was a bit less. Therefore, a lot of also the other thing is the kind of communication is lot more sort of rational, logical, in the West or in US, right? As opposed it to being, combination of rational and emotional in Asia. The third thing is, I would say, use of technology by consumers was much less in US compared to in Asia, right? So the the digital behavior, how much time is spent online, the role of digital in influencing brand decisions, the percentage contribution of e-commerce were much lower in US, compared to India, China, Vietnam, Korea.
Do you think that was driven by the years you were there in US versus Asia? Was that a factor? Because the e-commerce has grown tremendously in the last 5 to 10 years and at different points in different countries. And
So
right now, I
e-commerce
think across all countries it's huge, right? There hardly any country where it isn't huge.
I'm talking about from the lens of the categories that I worked with. So e-commerce is growing everywhere. I'm talking about percentage. Just to give you an example, now, so diapers is one of the first few categories that explodes in e-commerce, right? When e-commerce comes into a country, it's typically technology or cell phones, cosmetics, and diapers. These are the 3 categories that kind of bring in the consumers, right? So
Yeah, I mean, diapers was what started the e-com industry practically.
at that time, again, I'm talking now. I was in US between 20 end of 2019 to mid of 22, so 2.5 years. It was around around the 10% mark in terms of the contribution of e-commerce for diapers. 10, whereas China was 50%, Korea was 70%, Vietnam was nascent, but it had gone to the double-digit mark. India was anywhere 25-30%.
And that's very interesting because that was the period, that was the pandemic lockdown period that you were there. And still,
so it has gone up. Yeah. So it would have gone up, but see, there would have become 100% in, or 90% in Asia. So, and this is just one example. See, overall, I think in US, again, more developed the country is, the slower would be the pace of change. Correct. So, for example, in US, there's a big habit of going to these hypermarkets. Once every
Like
month.
the Costco's and
You
all.
know, you sort of drive for 20 miles, go in your big SUV or pickup truck, right? Stock it, go and put everything in your basement, right? And buy. And that is where also, that's why you have big packs, multi packs, etc. Right? And then you have your loyalty cards and this thing. So that habit is very ingrained, right? Even during
And I can
lockdown,
understand for a bulky
people
product
used to
like
do that,
diapers.
right?
So
No, so just
for a
hear me
bulky
out.
product like diapers, आपको पता है कि ये अगले 2-3 साल तो मुझे बच्चे के लिए चाहिए ही चाहिए. You can actually buy 6 months of diapers versus people like us in not as huge houses that US normally have, or at least I have an impression that they've got huge basements, houses like you're saying. वो 6 महीने के डायपर खरीद सकते हैं, but in other countries, you know कि यार मेरे को ये वाला एक बिग पैक भी मेरे को हर हफ्ते खरीदना है. एंड फॉर इंस्टेंस Amazon ने सब्सक्रिप्शन शुरू कर रखे थे, ये अपने आप आते रहेगा, हर हफ्ते आ जाएगा. Is that
Absolutely. So if I look at this thing, wherever there was fragmented retail or mom and pop stores, right, there the rate of e-commerce growth has been high, right? Now, for example, in US, typical shopper journey used to say there is one monthly purchase and then there is one top-up purchase, right? So you visit, an average family visits the stores maybe 2 to 3 times a month. In Thailand, there's a shopper study which came that a family visits the shop 5 times a day, goes 5 times a day to buy something. एक एक करके वो बाइक में जा रहे हैं, बाइक पे पीछे कितना सामान आएगा, right? They don't have those big SUV and pickup trucks, and there is literally there are 10 shops, outside your house, as opposed to going, driving 30 miles, right? So those are the ones where actually in a way e-commerce mental journey is closer to mom and pops, right? Where you go and say ye chahiye, right? Instead of that you type it out, right? And you are buying one product at a time. So so that journey is one. The other thing is also from a price point of view. Yes, e-commerce has played on the price arbitrage. So typically the mom and pops used to have the highest price within a channel, right? The bigger stores used to offer some kind of a discount, right? So what e-commerce has done, the instancy of a mom and pop stores at the price of a organized big hypermarket. They've kind of bridged that gap.